Straight up with a twist.
What's up, humans? This is Katie Rose, straight up with a twist. So before we get into today's topic, so it looks like we're going to be getting some relief with our student loans, just a little bit. I think that's great. We got what, $10,000 up to $10,000 in federal relief. So I think that's some good news. I know some people feel a little frustrated, like, well, how come they're doing it now? I had to pay all this money and it's not fair. Well, at least we're a step in the right direction. So I thought that was some good news. And they found some fossil feet, some dinosaur fossils in Texas. I'm like, wow. And they're like carved in limestone. So they're like permanent. They're there forever. Herbivore and carnivore dinosaur feet. And I'm like, heck yeah. All right. But today we're going to be talking about bullying. Now, this is not an easy topic. This is something that I dealt with growing up. And I also have many friends who've dealt with this growing up, and even some friends who were bullied and became bullies themselves. But this is not the situation with my guest today. I've got Ashley Sanchez with me. Hi, Ashley.
Hello.
So she lives out in St. Pete, Tampa, and she used to live over here in the Central Florida area, Orlando. And she's got her family out there, and I know that she grew up with some situations. So I wanted to bring her on to discuss this because it's more than just bullying. And I will jump into kind of start off with my story before we get into yours. So thank you, Ashley, for coming on today. It can be an emotional topic. I know that you have moved past this. You are a strong girl. And, if anything, it did make you a better person and, to be more empathetic towards others around you. And that's why we're friends. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So my story, and, when I read about this, there's a lot of different reasons as to, why people do this. Before we dive into the psychology of it, when I was younger, first of all, I hated my last name. I kind of don't want to say it on this podcast because then people will be like, oh, I know. But I hated my last name, and people used to find ways to like use my last name and then make me feel inferior with it, like make it rhyme with things or whatever. So I hated that. And I was short, and it's always easy to pick on a short girl. And it's like, okay, pipsqueak, okay, shorty. And like, it always sounds like it's endearing at first, but when you're young, it can kind of affect you. It was fourth grade that I started getting bullied. And we didn't grow up with money, and my mom very rarely would take me clothing shopping. And she always picked, like, we never got to go to the Gap and to Old Navy, not even Old Navy. I mean, like 579 on a special occasion, the Limited 2 on a special occasion. We couldn't afford anything. And we went to this cheap store on iDrive. It literally, I think was called like discount clothing. Like it was super cheap. And so we're looking for clothes, and when I was younger, I didn't really care to wear dresses because little boys would chase me around the playground, and I was like a tomboy. And so I would do like pull-ups, and I'd like climb the pole, and then boys would get under my dress and be like, I could see your underwear. And I was like, Mom, I'm never wearing dresses again. I do not want to wear dresses to school. I'm like, these boys are looking up my skirt. And I'm like, I was an acrobat. So I wanted to like do flips on the playground and stuff like that. So my mom was upset, but I was like, it's fine, I'll just wear shorts. So then she just started buying me shorts and stuff. Well, I got a little older. I was in fourth, fifth grade, and I'm like, oh, I'm about to go to middle school. And I was like, okay, I'll try some dresses on. And this was it for me. After this, I went to Jinko jeans and FUBU pants, which doesn't even make sense. I didn't realize it was for us, by us, and I'm some white girl wearing FUBU. I was stupid. And I was not educated on what that was for. And I went to the store, and I had this like sleeveless dress, and I'll never forget it. It was blue and white, and I had these like blue, like geometric shapes on it, and it was sleeveless, but like, so all you could see was my shoulders, and it came up to here. So it was not a scoop neck. It was all the way up to my neck, but it was form fitting, and it went down to my knees, and it was form fitting though. And I had no boobs. Now, as you know, I'm a 34C now. So I did my little, squisha, grease, trying to get boobs, and I prayed for them, and eventually I did get them. But I was flat chested. I had nothing yet. I didn't get boobs till high school, honestly. And so I wore this dress to school, and everybody started calling me a slut. And I was like, are you serious? So I went home and I said, Mom, what's a slut? And she's like, are you kidding? She's like, people are calling you that? And I was like, yeah, what does it mean? And she's like, it's not nice, And I'm like, well, what's going on? So then like the cool group of kids, they were like, and I was kind of like a middle ground. Like I would hang out with the cool kids sometimes and then like hang out with the nerds. I kind of like was a chameleon. I kind of just like hung out with everybody. And then they started calling me, how nicknames would be cool. Like, what's your nickname in this grade or whatever? And you had slam books and you'd write in them.
Yeah.
Well, they started calling me Slitch. And I was like, oh, okay. And so that became my nickname. And I thought I was being like indicted into the cool club, but it was slut and bitch put together. And yeah. And one of my friends came up to me and said, Katie, I just have to tell you. She's like, this is what it means. And I started crying and I was like, what is going on? And then I had one best friend that I used to hang out with all the time, like literally would be dropped off at her house every day, would sit on the roof. Like I did everything with this girl. And then she decided to be friends with the two female bullies in the school. And we were doing patrol. Remember patrol?
Oh, yes.
And I was so proud to be a patrol. And so we did patrolling plus. The real reason I did patrol is because I had to get to school earlier. And that meant people didn't see my mom's like piece of crap station wagon that would squeak and the doors would squeak. And it was so embarrassing. All these like childhood traumas. And then that way I could get there earlier and nobody would have to see my car. And then I could help people open the doors, So I was patrolling the hallway and we had so many friendship bracelets and all these things. And she came up to me, handed me my friendship bracelet and said, I don't want to be your friend anymore.
No.
And I was like trying to like, okay. And I was like trying to suck it up and like,
What
okay,
grade
that's
was
fine. That was fourth grade. Yeah, third or fourth grade. And she was a singer. And I think she got mad because she was a singer too. She was better than I was. And she also played the violin. And I got like the solo she wanted or something, in like the really crappy school play. And I was like Rhode Island because I was the shortest. And she wanted to be Rhode Island when you did the states play, and I had to sing, what's it like to be small? What's it like to be tiny? As Rhode Island. It was really funny. So cute little parody. And I think she was mad, but I always thought she was super talented. I was jealous because she could play the violin. Like I was always like, cool. Like I always supported whatever my friends did. And I was devastated. Well, those bullies got together. And thank God I had someone who warned me. I think I had a boy warn me. I kept thinking I was being invited to the cool club, but I never was. And they were like, Katie, meet us after school with our club. We're going to have a meeting at the nature trail. So in the back of our school, there was a nature trail. And I was like, okay. So I was going to meet them after school at the nature trail. And this guy came up to me and this kid was like, don't go back there. They're planning on beating you up.
Oh my goodness.
In the woods. Like I was going to be beat up or picked on or something in the woods. And I'm like, what? And like at the time, that kind of stuff devastated me. I went home, I cried. I was so upset. And then later in life, something similar happened to me in ninth grade. Some Spanish girl was mad because I would hang out with this guy she liked. And I was like, I don't like him. So like, you can have him. He's just my friend. Like we'd walk between periods together. And she was like, oh, you think you could take my man? I'm like, he's not my man. You can totally have him. I just hang out with him. She's like, meet me by the flagpoles after school. I'm like, oh yeah. Like I'm going to show up to a fight. I'm like, no, I'm not going to meet you at the flagpoles, moron. I'm like, so that older experience made me stronger for my future. And so anytime somebody tried to mess with me, I'm like, fuck off. I'm like, leave me alone. You're stupid. I'm like, I'm not fighting you. I'm like, this is dumb. So that's my story in a nutshell.
Well, it's interesting because like all the stories, like all the instances you gave, clearly like you can trace it back to the root of the problem, which is insecurity or jealousy on the person's part that's doing the bullying. I mean, from from the, the singing ability to the part in the play to the walking with the man. Like, it's all rooted in insecurity. And I feel like that messaging today is more available to the kids who are now, like my kid. I have a child in middle school, I have a child in 7th grade, and I have a little girl in 5th grade, and they hear that. I feel like, they do a much better job these days with understanding bullying and the root of bullying.
It's
And
not cool to be mean anymore. It used
it's
to be cool.
really not. It's really not. And I'll tell you what, I was terrified at the thought of my son, who's now in 7th grade. I was terrified of him going into 6th grade, because honestly, 6th grade was the worst year of my life. Like, to this day, I have trauma from my 6th grade year. And I lost sleep the summer before he went into 6th grade. Now, granted, boys' experiences in middle school and in bullying are different, just in general, from females' experience. So it was already going to be a little different, but he's a very sweet soul, and he's a very gentle soul. And so I feared for him that either he was going to go into middle school and change, because of peer pressure, change into, that sweetness was going to go away, or it was going to be peer pressured out of him, or he was going to be bullied for his sweetness and his tenderness and whatever. But honestly, he's in 7th grade, and he's either oblivious or the reprogramming, I guess, of children, and like the messaging of bullying has really helped, because I'll ask him, I'll say, how's it going? Is anybody being mean to you? And every day he's just like, no, everything's great. And I'll ask him,
so far, so good.
Yeah. And I'll ask him, well, not just with you. Do you see it around you? Like, I try to pry. I'm like, what's going on around you? Like, is there bullying? Like, are girls
because you're ready to help? You're like, mama's ready to help you. We could talk about this.
Right. And not just with him, but like, I want to know, okay, he's not having this experience. Is he hearing it from people? And he's like, Mom, not really. Like, everybody's pretty nice to each other. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to take that as the truth then, because that's amazing. It's hard for me to grasp, and probably hard for you to grasp, considering what we went through, like our specific generation. When we were younger, we didn't have that messaging, right? We didn't have that rebranding of bullying. We were told to endure it because it made us stronger. And I think both of us can say that, like, to some extent, I agree with that. Like you said earlier, you are the person you are today, and you're able to withstand even bullying that happens as adults a little bit better, because you've had those experiences when you were younger. But all in all, I'm very glad that it appears, at least, that today's generation is maybe getting a different message than we got.
Well, and you said something earlier that you think it's easier for boys than it is for girls. Why do you think that is?
Well, I guess a couple reasons. I feel like, and this could be different. Again, I have children, but I'm not living their daily life, so I don't know. So it's just my inference of it. But I think that for boys, it's really just about impressing each other. For girls, at that age, let's say specifically like the middle school age, for girls, it's about competing with each other and then also impressing the boys. And I think that for the boys, it's, even though they're interested in girls, I really feel like, or whoever they're interested in, it doesn't matter. But
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, at that age, it's more like they're just trying to be alpha amongst each other. They're fighting for that kind of alpha place. Whereas girls, we want to be liked by other girls and boys. Whereas I feel like the boys just really care at that age about themselves and their own little pack, and
their competitiveness is in good fun, and they don't hang on to things, and girls tend to hang on to certain things much longer than boys do. I can agree with that.
And of course, just the branding and messaging that girls get, that we have to, be a certain way and look a certain way, and it's all for the opposite sex and not for ourselves. Like, there's just this desperation, I think, that exists subconsciously within young females, because they're getting it from all angles. The expectations for them are just set a little bit higher, I think, from a physical standpoint, from a mental standpoint. Just the pressure builds so much earlier, I think, for females.
Yeah. And, when we are changing it's hard to talk to middle schoolers and early high schoolers about it, but like the sexuality thing is so true. It's like you get this instinct to be like, oh, well, I need to have boobs and I want a boy to look at me and,
Right.
or whatever. And so there's more pressure to get a different kind of attention.
For sure. And I think that the validation for females, even now, even though I can hear that the messaging is trying to change, but the validation for females still, I think to this day and age, comes ultimately from how we look. And for boys, I think really their, valuation comes from more from their personality, maybe, or their ability to, succeed in sports or whatever. It's not solely physical. There's not as much emphasis, I don't think, on the physical for boys as there is for girls.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of the physical, you had what a lot of women would have dreamed for.
Right.
And I would love for you to talk about that experience.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting that you put it that way, because it's so true. You always hear, and I feel like even in the books, I was a big reader when I was younger. So all the Judy Blume books and all the Babysitters Club books, or all the books.
I was just about to say that.
The media that we would consume in our day and age, and even now, the struggle of the young female was, I want to be beautiful. I want to look.
Hey, I read Cosmo.
Yeah, I want to look like a supermodel. I want to look like a Victoria's Secret model. I want to have these big boobs. I want to have whatever. And so, I couldn't relate to that struggle, because actually the first time I ever even realized that I had boobs was 5th grade, when my teacher, I was playing outside because in 5th grade you still have recess, right? So we're playing outside in recess, and I come back inside and my teacher hands me a letter that's addressed to my mom, and she said, "Don't open this, but I want you to give this to your mom when you get home."
And you're like, I'm opening this.
Oh, absolutely. Like, come on. Like, there's actually going to be somebody who doesn't open it. In what world? So of course I open it and I read it, and that is like where the insecurity began, because it was a handwritten letter to my mom, and it wasn't rude and it wasn't mean, but it just said, "Hey, you need to take Ashley to get her a bra. Like, it's
you
time."
didn't have one yet? Oh my
God. No. It's time. She's playing outside. I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was something to the gist of, she's playing outside. It's very obvious that she needs a bra. And this was like the beginning of 5th grade. The very first bra. So my mom took me to get a bra, and actually I was initially kind of excited about it. I think like any girl would be, I didn't.
Good for you, because when I first got my training bra, I was so embarrassed. I had two brothers, and I'll never forget. I'm like, why did this happen? Like, it's like ingrained in my brain. We went to Target, and my mom is holding up training bras against my chest, and these 2 boys were walking down the aisle and saw me and pointed and laughed at me.
Oh no. Yeah, well, I mean, I was never a tomboy, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but like when I was little, just from the time I was a little girl, I loved dressing up. I loved makeup. I loved the idea of just like being super feminine. And so to me, and I had 2 brothers also, but my mom and I would always do things just kind of on our own. And I just thought it was just this crowning moment. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. And of course I was aware that boobs were like supposed to be a good thing, right? So I'm like, cool. So I start wearing bras, and the first bra I ever bought on that day was a B.
Whoa.
I didn't start with a training bra. I did not start with, so I it literally was overnight. It's funny. It's so long ago now that my memory of it feels like overnight. I really don't know how long it took, but it happened pretty fast. And, I've had 4 children, and I did not get any stretch marks on my belly or anything. Like, I'm not prone to stretch marks, but guess what? I have stretch marks where my boobs are, because it happened that fast. Like that quickly overnight. So that's just proof that it kind of like out of nowhere. Well, the rest of the year was really kind of uneventful. Nobody in 5th grade. It's just this transition, I think, from elementary to middle school, because nobody in fifth grade really said anything about it. Once I got a bra, like I didn't really have any bullying about it in the rest of that year, any instances. But it was sixth grade, it was going into middle school. Suddenly I was with all of these kids who I didn't know, a lot of, you got other elementary schools joining, and it's just like a new group of kids. And literally from up until day one of middle school up until my senior year of high school, literally it was every day it was something. Every day it was torture. And I guess of my sixth grade year was, I'll never forget, after lunch, there were cliques that formed. We're about halfway
Oh
through
yeah, the lunch table is a
the
whole
lunch
nother
table.
topic.
Yeah. So, after lunch, the cliques had formed and been established by this point. There were the popular kids, there were the whatever it is. I kind of was like, I was kind of quiet and booksy and nerdy a little bit. Like I didn't really have a specific place. That I belonged. I guess I sat with like the nerdy kids. But after lunch one day, we came outside and we would all gather in the courtroom before the courtyard before the
I'm like, the
bell would ring.
courtroom. Why do you have a courtroom?
Not courtroom, courtyard, before the bell would ring. And so everybody, the whole sixth grade class, we all ate lunch together, all sitting in this courtyard waiting on the bell to ring. I'm minding my own business, sitting down on a bench, reading a book. And I swear it's just out of a movie. The popular girl and her little clique, there's like four of them, come walking up to me out of nowhere. It's like the sea parted. I swear to God, it's like a movie.
Mean
Came
Girls,
walking up to me, like with their arms crossed, stopped right in front of me at the bench where I was reading. I look up at them, and the one girl, her name was Megan. She says, "Hey, Ashley, we all would just really like to know what brand of toilet paper you use to stuff your bra with." And the entire courtyard like started laughing, and like and then people started throwing things at me, and they're like, "Oh, she stuffs her bra, she stuffs her bra." It was the most embarrassing moment. It was terrible. Again, there were little things that happened every day. And I know we don't have a lot of time here, but just to like sprinkle in some instances, it was always boys pretending to bump into me while their group of friends watched, and they would bump into me and fondle me basically. At this point, by the end of sixth grade, I was a full C, almost a D. Okay. By the end of sixth grade. And for people listening who don't know me, I'm 4'10". I'm like 98 pounds soaking wet. Okay. I'm not like, I'm a small girl. And, boys would try to bump into me and fondle me. And boys would try to throw things if I sat there at the lunch table, throw things into my cleavage to see if they could catch things into my
That's
cleavage.
the story I remember. Didn't you say it was like M&Ms?
Well, everything. In eighth grade, one specific instance, the most popular guy in school, and this is like one of the most heartbreaking moments to look back on. I'm sitting in class, and at this point, like, I keep to myself. I don't like the attention, but I want to be liked. I mean, it's everybody
wants to be liked.
Nature to be liked, right? So I want to be liked by people. And this boy was really cute, and he was the most popular guy in school. And he was in that class, and he would pay me attention, but not nice attention. But I still craved it. It's that weird, like, I still wanted his attention, even though it was like negative attention. He would talk to me, and like, anyway, one day he was like, "Hey, Ashley, I wonder if you'd do me a favor. Would you let me see how many pencils I can fit into your cleavage?" And people were laughing, but like, I wanted him to like me, and I wanted to be the cool girl who was like, I wanted to be part of it, like almost self-deprecating, like, haha, yeah, let's see. But inside,
if you can't beat him, join him. Yeah.
Right. So I sat there and let him hand me pencils, and I just kept putting them into my cleavage. And there was like 12 pencils by the end, and everybody was like, all the guys were like, "Oh my God." Thank God there weren't cell phone cameras back then. But Katie, after that class period ended, I went to the bathroom and just sat down and just cried. And that was like every day for me. And it was torture. And, all that kind of stuff just sort of bled into high school. Of course, I got called.
If you could go back, like knowing who you are today, what do you think you would have done different?
I don't know what I could have done. I mean, I continued to kind of just try to not let it affect me. I'll tell you
Like,
what,
I
I
mean,
mean,
if anything, it's like you could have stood up, like, especially when they were throwing things at you and been like, y'all are just jealous. This isn't toilet paper.
yeah, right. Well, I definitely had like, I used to lay in bed and like daydream about, it sounds silly, but daydream about flashing them so that they could see that like my
See,
boobs
it's
were
real.
real. Exactly. Of course, I would never do that. But, I got called the slut word too. And like, I was a virgin until college. But because of the way I looked, like people just assumed that like I was a slut. I had that branded. Of course, the girls were so mean to me because I got attention from the boys, right? So it
Hmm.
wasn't just the boys, it was the girls constantly hating on me, putting notes in my locker, you know what I'm saying? Just saying horrible things to me within earshot on purpose so that I could hear it. And the ultimate effect that it had on me was the moment I turned 18, I got a breast reduction. And
Yeah.
I was so relieved, like walking out of that surgery. And I guess if I had anything to do over, I somewhat not hate myself, but like it makes me sad that I felt like I needed to physically alter myself to feel like a human being. And that was thanks to them. Honestly, it was thanks to
Yeah.
the what I withstood. And now, as a almost 40-year-old, I have scars, obviously, all over my breasts, and
You
it
had
affected
a
breast.
keloid reaction. Is that what it was?
Yeah, I keloid scar. And so I didn't know that until I had the surgery. But yeah, I have very thick scars. It interfered with breastfeeding my children because my ducts were kind of all messed up. And like, looking back on it now, I wish that I had been strong enough to be able to say, this is who I am. But just, I was worn down. I was worn
Yeah.
down by the bullying.
Well, I will say, because you are so small, if anything, it does help you physically. My mother is the same height as you, and she also has very large breasts. And to this day, she's 62, and she's like, I need a breast reduction. She's like, this is killing me,
Oh, yeah. Well,
and physically it does help, I guess.
yeah, no joke. I mean, there's no joking that things are definitely easier, not just on the attention front. I finally stopped getting so much attention, but on my back.
Well, I could disagree with that. You're a very pretty girl, so.
Oh, thank you. Well, at least different attention because, and it's funny because it did change. Honestly, if you would like to know, strangers, I'm not just talking about school, but like strangers in the grocery store would come up to me. I would have grown men come up to me as a 17-year-old and be like, damn girl, there's some huge titties.
Are ridiculous. I
Exactly.
swear. And because me and you, the way our personalities are, it's like we just like a regular person would react differently. But you
Oh,
and
totally.
I are always kind of like, okay, like I don't know, like we kind of let people, I don't want to say we let people walk all over us, but we have a nicer reaction than I think other people would. Like if I
Totally.
did something like that to other people, people would be like, God, Katie, you're such a bitch. I had people invite themselves to my wedding. I'm like,
Yeah.
I have never invited myself to somebody's wedding. I had people that I've known for years come up to me and they're like, I'm getting an invitation, right? I'm like, I would never walk up to somebody and say that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I internalized a lot of it, but by the time I graduated, by the time I had my surgery, I was a double F. If
Oh, wow.
just to give you perspective of how big I was, so it definitely did help. Like clothes were easier to buy. I can remember like walking out of surgery, the first thing I did was go to Target and buy a cheap bra because up until that point, I had to have my bra specially made, and they were hundreds of dollars because the cups had to be so big, but the bands they didn't make cups that big with bands that small basically
Hmm.
back then anyway. So it did help, but I do look back on it with sadness, and it affects me today just because the way it's affected me to this day is that I am still very suspicious of any kind of male attention, which I guess has its positives. But like if I see any guy approach me, you know I guess one thing it did do is it made me not promiscuous. It kept me from being promiscuous in those early years because I just trusted all males from the
Hmm.
time I was very little, just because the way they felt like they could talk to me like I was an object from the time I was 10 years old. It made me not want any male attention basically at all. So on a positive side,
Yeah,
I
it's a
wasn't a
blessing in
promiscuous.
disguise. And
Yeah.
it made you see the kind men that, even if a guy, I mean, men are men, if they're going to think it, but like there is a respectful way to do things, and your husband is very respectful. So
Yeah, totally.
And just the psychology of it, I feel like people, they make you feel bad so that you don't thrive around them. They don't want to see you thrive, and they've got feelings of inadequacy. And I understand that, a lot of people have moments of low self-esteem, but that doesn't mean to bring others down and to pick on others. I was one of those people that, because I was bullied, if I saw someone else getting bullied, I would step in.
Totally.
When people feel uncomfortable, I can sense it. Like, I'm very empathic. And as soon, like, for example, if we're like in a circle of people and somebody says something and nobody laughs, but like they think they're saying something funny, or it's just awkward, I'll be like, oh, I get what you're saying. Because I don't want people to make fun of that person and like do the eyes thing and like look at each other and then make that person feel uncomfortable, because I've been that person where I'm like, why is everybody looking at me like I'm an idiot?
Yeah, totally. I agree. And I think that is, like, again, a positive aspect of this. I think anybody who experiences that kind of bullying, later in life does have that empathy and hopefully can pass it down, and that's what I try to do. I try to teach my kids, that if somebody is mean, or if somebody is bullying, it's a reflection of them. It's a reflection probably of their life outside of school, their insecurities, their jealousies, and it has nothing to do with you. I wish I had had that messaging. Who knows how, it would have changed me or the outcome I had, with physically altering my appearance. But, I think that it can create empaths, and it can make you more sensitive to other people's feelings. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I think my mom really helped me learn how to relook at things. She taught me at a very young age not to, let jealousy take over. She's like, if somebody has really pretty hair, go tell them they have really pretty hair, because
Yeah.
you probably have something that they don't. There's no sense in trying to bring that person down because they have something that you don't. I'm like,
That's a great thing to do. And I think that it would be so powerful if what we taught, especially young girls, was if you look at somebody and you feel insecure because you think they look better than you or they have something that you don't, you should go compliment that person on that thing. Say it out loud. Say, if you look at a girl and say, man, I wish I had her hair, go over there and tell her what beautiful hair she has, because I feel like it coming out of your mouth instead of going inside of you can kind of release that tension and keep you from building, a resentment towards somebody who doesn't deserve it.
absolutely. I just wanted to ask you what you feel motivates people to be a bully, because I know people that claim, and I'm gonna, I don't know because I didn't live their past, but I know people who are still bullies today and literally will talk behind people's backs, and they claimed they were bullied when they were younger. I'm like, how did the person who was bullied become the bully?
That's a tough question. I think that, well, I think being bullied, like I said earlier, we just came off the discussion about how one of the positives of being bullied is that it can turn you into an empath. But I do think that, like, you can go one or two ways. If you don't become an empath and become more sensitive to other people's feelings and want to shield them from feeling the same thing, then you go the opposite way. It's like a pendulum, right?
Mhm.
You go to making other people hurt. It's like hurt people hurt, right? You've heard that saying before.
Yeah.
Hurt people hurt. And I bet if the people who are grown and are still bullies, it sounds to me like they haven't fully processed or healed from their younger bullying trauma that they have themselves. Because I think once you've been able to process it and maturely look back and pull the lessons out of the experiences you've had to become a better person, if you haven't been able to do that, then you're still living in the trauma, and therefore you're causing trauma. Do you know what I'm saying? You're not processed fully from that hurt.
Yeah, and I think from what I've seen from these people that I know, it sounds to me like the reason they don't know they're bullying. They think it's a form of strength. They think that they are nipping it in the bud before it happens. So sometimes I feel like people will say mean things or put people down because they're like, well, I need to say it before they do. before they come after
Totally.
me. If I can stifle them ahead of time. I mean, I've had literally, and it still happens to this day, I have women that have made up complete stories about me. I'm just sitting on my couch, like reading a magazine, watching TV, and all of a sudden I find out all these things about me that don't exist. And I'm like, what? What is going on? And there are women that will be in, new women will come into their lives and they will make sure, oh, let me tell you this thing about Katie Rose before you've even met her so that you know. And then I can feel it. I will get introduced to people. I'm like, hey, and they already, I could see it in their faces. Like they're already like, oh, hey. And I'm like, why are you acting like that towards me? Like I can feel it, you know? And I don't get why people waste their time. Like I learned a long time ago to tell my own story. I was so tired of protecting myself. And, you know, I used to be more of a private person, believe it or not. I used to keep stuff to myself. And because of so many people made up crap, I was like, you know what? You want to know the story? Come and ask me. I'm right here. Go to the horse's mouth. I'm just going to tell my own story. I'm going to tell everybody my business before somebody else does because I was tired. I was exhausted having to like explain myself.
Yeah, control your narrative for sure before somebody else does. And it's like, you know, I think you tapped into something. I think it's a defense mechanism. Like, you know, for those people, they're like, well, and those people also tend to be very self-deprecating of themselves. And then also very, like they live in extreme ways. They're self-deprecating, but they're also very they're the first to announce their accomplishments, and they're the first to kind of be self-deprecating on their failures. And I think it's really just, these are people that get affirmation from the opinions and reactions of others, and that they haven't been able to mature or grow to a place where the affirmation comes from themselves or from some sort of peace they've found. The affirmation has to come from how many people like them, how many people are on their side. It's me against them always, you know?
So very true. And I know we might be thinking of similar people, but you know, when I was in cheerleading, and this is kind of one of those things that I can see people grow from it. I'm very forgiving. Like if somebody comes and apologizes to me genuinely, I'm like, okay. I'm like, we're cool. Like, okay, I get it. You know, like I don't want this to sit on my heart either. But I did cheerleading in 9th grade because I was just like looking for something to do. I'm like, I'm in high school. I should sign up for something. I'll audition to be a cheerleader. And I walk in and I see all these girls and I was so shy. And this one girl came up to me and she's like, do you need help? And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. They said something about spiriting. And she goes, you don't know what spiriting is? I'm like, no, what is that? And she's like, oh, it's like at the end of a routine. And then you're like, and she like showed me a couple moves. I'm like, okay, well, I got it. And I remember like walking up to the door and my name was on the list. And I look at my mom and went, oh my God, I got it. I was like, what? I'm like, and it's just because I have a dance background and I was an acrobat. So like, but cheerleading is like really hard, first of all. Yeah. These cheerleaders were hardcore. I will tell you, it's so funny. I can be a little oblivious sometimes, but I just thought we were going to play at football games. I did not know we were going to be going to regional competitions. And all of a sudden we kept practicing this routine. I'm like, yeah, this is just for the football games on Thursday nights, right? Like we're cool. And they're like, no, you have to spend money. We're going to regionals. I'm like, what? I had no idea. Well, guess what? This regional day fell on the exact same day. I got to do one, but fell on the exact same day as my dance competition.
Oh man.
The difference in dance competitions is I have like 3 dance solos. I'm also part of like 5 other group numbers. I can't just leave. So they had to pull a girl from JV to replace me, which honestly wasn't that big of a deal. She just learned the routine and it was fine. And these girls hated me so much. I ended up quitting the team. I was like, I can't handle this. I caught them talking about me. It was like a movie, like you said. They didn't know I was in the bathroom stall and they were talking about me.
Oh, no.
And then I walked out. I'm like, hi, I heard you. Yeah. And I had a locker where they rehearsed for the dance magnet program. And there was little holes in the locker. They poured water in my locker, ripped my tights, pulled them through the holes, and then tied them to my friends' lockers.
Oh my gosh.
And I came in And I just started crying. And then I tried to be strong because I was embarrassed. I was like, yeah, this is what the cheerleaders did to me. They're like, we're so sorry, Katie. And they would say awful things about me when I walked by. Well, it took till senior year, and it was only two people. I remember it was this girl, Allie, and this girl, Teddy, and they both came up to me. And this is when I started like really dancing. I was doing a lot with the Dance Magnet program. I choreographed this Thriller routine that they kept playing on the TV every morning news, like during Halloween. They're like, that's so cool. You choreographed that? I'm like, yeah. And they came up to me and they said, this is like a little too late, but we just wanted to say we're so sorry for the way that we treated you in 9th grade. And I was like, wow, thank you so much. And then years later, I ran into like the queen bee herself, who was like so awful to me. She was like the head cheerleader at a bar, and she was still talking shit. I was like sitting next to her, and I'm like, do you remember me? And she's like, and I was like, you know who I am. And I was like, I don't remember what I said to her, but I definitely just felt powerful. I felt like, you can't hurt me anymore. You're still a snarky bitch.
Yeah, some people just don't change. They just don't get it out of their system for whatever reason. But again, it's like, to me, it's just a sign of like and I hate to feel, but I do, sometimes I feel superior when I experience it, because I'm like, this person has obviously just not been able to elevate themselves to a higher plane of existence. And that sucks for them, because it sure is nice up here. The air sure is nice up here on this plane of like understanding and empathy and love and acceptance of myself. And it's just so sad they can't join me up here, I feel the same way. And I don't think that is pompous at all. I think that means that you have matured, that you're strong, and you know yourself. So right.
Well, before we exit, you sent me a quote, and I always love to read quotes for people, and because I think it can affect their day as well. But you sent me, "We all die. The goal isn't to live forever. The goal is to create something that will." And I found that was from Chuck Palahniuk. I don't know how to say that. I know it didn't have his name, but I looked it up and found the name.
I found like three. The reason I didn't put his name is because I found like 3 different sources for that quote. Somebody said it was Andy Warhol. Somebody said it was that Chuck guy. And then I saw somebody say it was like Selena. And I'm like,
goodness.
I'm like, I don't know for sure who it is, but I love the messaging. And so.
Yeah, they do the same thing with Marilyn Monroe quotes. I was like scarred when I found out a bunch of the things that I thought she had said she didn't. I'm like, what? I thought she said that. But yeah, and then you also sent me a John 4:18. There's no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love.
Yeah, I love that quote. I try to live by that.
Yeah, I think that's a great motto. I love talking to you. You always make it simple, and you're very down to earth, and I think that's why we are friends. And I think we are very good at seeing all perspectives. And I really think the key to all of it is, is taking time to learn who you want to be as a person, and to forgive others. Because even though there have been bullies, or people who have done me wrong, like I said, if I can open myself up to forgiveness, then people have a hard time saying sorry. It's one of literally the hardest things in the world for a person to do. And I feel freedom when I apologize to somebody. If I know I've been wrong, I actually feel relieved that I apologize to them, because you'll be surprised at how somebody will react. I think people are afraid of what their reaction will be, but really people are people. And they're like, I've done bad things before. I accept your apology. I think people are afraid of not being accepted.
And apologizing disarms people. And I feel like that should be your goal in any kind of conflict, is to disarm the other person. And the quickest way to disarm the other person is to look them in the eye and say, I take responsibility for my part in whatever this conflict was. And you just watch them immediately just be completely disarmed. And it brings you back to ground zero, and it helps you just, and again, if I could leave this chat about bullying with anything, I think beyond taking responsibility and apologizing if you have harmed somebody, another thing I've learned that's just helped me avoid bullying in current situations is just to always try to look at the other person, the person who's doing the bullying, look at their perspective, not that they're right, not to give them any kind of validation in the way they're acting, but instead to look at them and their situation and find a way to feel sorry for them. I know that sounds funny, but find a way to humanize them and say, this person, the way this person is acting has nothing to do with me and everything to do with them. And once you put the burden of the bullying back onto the bully, and you understand that you have no part in what they say or think or feel about you, you feel so much lighter, because really it's all about them. It's their issue, and that's what I try to teach my kids.
It helps you move on to and not carry that burden.
Totally.
Well, thank you so much. I think it's an important topic, and I think we definitely touched on some things that can, help people rethink their choices and how they act, and what drives them to do what they do, and apologize, say you're sorry, do the right thing.
Amen.
All right, Miss Ashley Sanchez, thank you so much.
Thank you. Love you, Katie Rose.
Love you too.